What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. We are talking through another guest draft today. We'll look through the draft and of course answer some of your community questions. And today I'm joined by Harry. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Hot. It's very warm in the UK. Us Englanders love to complain about the temperature, but it is pretty warm. Not bad though. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's good to get you on finally. I'm actually living in Ireland, and I can tell you now it's pretty much back to cold weather, and it was raining this morning when I was out in my shorts and t-shirt walking the dog. So Ireland's back to normal, and to be honest, it's quite nice over here to be a little bit cooler. But of course, we are going to be talking about drafts, which we'll come on to in just a sec. If you are not already following Harry, make sure you do. I'll put all the links in the description below. FPL Harry on Twitter, FPL Harry on YouTube as well. I don't know what the numbers will be looking like by the time this video goes out, but you're very close to 20,000 subscribers from what I just saw. So if you haven't already, go and subscribe. Like I said, links will be in the description below. And even if he's past 20k by the time this video comes out, still go and subscribe anyway. All right, we'll just talk quickly about rank history. I know there's a year you don't want to talk about, but I think there's an interesting talking point to come out of it. So you've absolutely smashed it in the last 2 years. Back-to-back top 4K, not even top 5K, top 4K. One question I had for you, have you changed the way you approach FPL? Because I've just got back-to-back top 10K, and 2 years ago is when I decided I was going to use expected data a little bit more. So it could be a coincidence that I then did a little bit better, but I did actually go out of my way to change the way I played the game. Have you changed much at all in how you play the last 2 years?
A little bit, and I don't want to put viewers off by saying this, but I've become a little bit more boring in the way I play the game over the past couple of seasons. I think I spend less time thinking I need to chase rank and go completely off the rails for the sake of it. Something that I've sort of started talking about and saying to myself is don't go differential for the sake of it, because don't go picking a player. At the end of the season, you need the players that score the most points. And I ended up, picking players that were differential because I thought, oh, in the off chance they do well. And I've kind of eliminated that from my game, and captaincy is a big thing for me as well. I did pretty well over the past couple of seasons. So just stop going off the radar. I'm going for those sort of differential picks. If I think they're good and I think they'll do well, then great. But I don't just pick them, because I think, oh, this week I fancy going for someone a bit different. I'll pick the players I think will score the most points. It sounds obvious, but it's worked quite well. And I think the sort of obvious picks have done quite well over the past couple of seasons, which has meant that, it's worked out quite well for me. There were a couple of seasons before, particularly the season before, I spent a lot of time with like Man City mids trying to jump on Mahrez, for example, and captain him, which is great if it comes off, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to get on it at the wrong time. And I think past couple of years, I've learned my lesson the hard way on that.
The thing is, what you just said there is completely true, right? The only objective is to get the most points. And that sounds so simple, but for some reason, everyone tries to complicate that by thinking they need all these big differentials. That's the only way to get ahead in rank. Yeah. But ultimately, if you've got a differential and someone that's owned by 90%, if they both get 10 points, you're not going anywhere anyway. So, yeah, I agree. I think like towards the end of the season, we can start talking about differentials because at that point, you do need to maybe do something different to get up the ranks. But early on, I wouldn't be worrying about it. Let's just talk about the 2017-18 season, right? We've all had dodgy ranks along the way, especially when you've been playing for a few years. But tell me about the one key thing, because this is a decision people are making this year. What was the one key thing that went wrong that season?
Yeah, so this is Salah's first season for anyone who can't remember. And basically, I didn't think Salah would do as well. And I had Mane for the sort of majority of the season. And I decided that I'm not going to go and get Salah, and I was going to keep sticking with Mane, and that eventually the tides would turn and it would eventually be Mane that was getting all the points and not Salah, given that Mane was a little bit more proven. And that basically never happened. And there was one game week where Salah was on the bench and he came on and scored more points. He scored, I think, sort of 2 goals and got an assist in his 20 minutes off the bench while Mane started and scored. And I thought, even if Salah's outscoring Mane off the bench, then this is just going to be it. So everyone looking at their drafts thinking, oh, this is great. I can take Salah out and I'll make an amazing team around him. Just be careful. It can be very damaging if you don't go with him.
Yeah, I had a pretty similar story where similar with Vardy. I think it might have been the year they won the league, or maybe it was the first year they were in the Premier League. I can't remember which, but Vardy was going mad, and he and Mahrez were really cheap at the start. And I got on Mahrez quickly, but I had the same thing. I just wouldn't get on Jamie Vardy. He kept scoring, and I kept thinking to myself, he's going to stop at some point. Everyone else has already got him, so what's the point in jumping on? And that goes back to that conversation about not having to go differential, right? If everyone's got Vardy, but he's going to keep scoring, you might as well bring him in. Same with, Salah for you. So, yeah, I thought that was an interesting talking point. But overall, 6 years, really decent rank history, especially the last 2 years. You're a bit like Abdul, who we had on the channel, going for triple hat-trick back-to-back 5Ks. So, yeah, good luck with that. Let's move on to the draft. Now, I know at this point, a lot of the drafts are looking very similar, especially specific players like Salah, Neto, etc. So we don't need to run through them again. I think we've talked about them to kind of death at this point. Although it is, I think, kind of almost like a reinforcement thing. If you see these players in a lot of drafts, then maybe you think, well, probably is quite a good pick. So let's talk about some players that are in there that aren't in many drafts. One of them is Dalot. Tell me this. Did he only enter the draft after the last few preseason games?
He's been in there about 24 hours, I would say,
so.
Probably maximum. But again, like there was a lot of links for Manchester United to be linked with a sort of right back, and it hasn't happened. And if he is going to start the season in that position, we know what he's capable of doing if he does get a run of starts. It doesn't look like Wan-Bissaka is going to get anywhere near that Manchester United team anytime soon again. So if he is going to start at 4.5, you've Brentford and Brighton in the first two. Like, it isn't bad at all. He's probably my favourite 4.5. I might be saying that because he's a bit flavour of the moment, but I do think he's capable. If he gets consistent starts, we know what he can do going forward. If he needs to improve his defensive game a little bit, then great. But I do think at 4.5, he's capable of being not a bad enabler at the beginning of the season.
Do you worry? Because with Man United, right, I think sometimes it depends like how long term you're looking. So for Man United, if you look at the first 4 fixtures, you got Brighton, Brentford, and Southampton. Obviously, the Liverpool game is tricky. If you extend that to the first 6, then it also includes Leicester and Arsenal. Even though Leicester weren't great last year, attacking wise, they were still pretty good. So my only worry would be, there's no. I say no bench. I know Andreas Pereira is probably going to play. I know De Silva might become or be part of the first 11 for Brentford at some point, even if it's not right at the start of the season. But do you worry about those games where you're going to have to play Dalot against like Liverpool, Arsenal, or are you just thinking attacking returns could be there and so he's still good enough?
Yeah, to be honest, looking at this team, I'm 0.5 million short of a team that I'd be happy with. And that would be to upgrade probably to Silva to like Bailey or someone to have that extra little bit of strength on the bench. Now, I have looked at like going Robertson into midfield and getting Diaz, for example. Again, it's not quite as easy to do with the money, but I'm about 0.5 million because, as you say, I don't have anyone on the bench that I'm really happy to play. Pereira has a good few opening fixtures in sort of the first 6, but I don't really want to have to start him ever. Not really going into the season expecting him to come in. So I'm trying to look around, where can I find that 0.5 million? At the moment, it's not obvious. I had sort of Harvey Barnes in for Foden because they have a good opening couple of games, but I like what Foden can offer. I need to find 0.5, I think. I'm not happy with how weak the bench is. Art just looked okay, scored again in pre-season today, but again, I don't think he's going to get that many minutes. So it's a little bit weak on the bench. And yeah, when Dalot has a tough run of fixtures, it's not great to have to start him every week.
Yeah, and I guess it's not like 4.5 million defenders, not necessarily a position you want to use a bunch of transfers on, especially early on. Have you considered going for less than 5 at the back? Because one thing, I feel like prices are pretty good this year. I think one issue with the prices is it's too easy to get a lot of the players from the top teams. But then again, I am sat here still struggling to put a draft together that I personally fully like. So maybe the prices are okay. But one of the key things is obviously there's loads of value in premium defenders. There's also lots of value in the cheap defenders, and they're usually the best bench options. So have you considered trying to move to like a 4 at the back instead of 5, or are you kind of stuck on big at the back?
Yeah, so I actually had a similar draft to this where basically had Robertson to Tomiyasu, and I think it had then Diaz in midfield, and instead of Foden, it went down to Martinelli, which again gave me that extra 4.5 million to have, 4.5 million defender to have, can rotate with Dalot. It strengthens the bench a little bit. So I have looked at that. The more I look at it, the more I really like Robertson over Diaz. And I think he can start the season really well. That's one of the big decisions which I find quite difficult to make at the moment about who that third Liverpool option is going to be. Trent and Salah are pretty much locks in my team. Robertson versus Diaz. If Jota's out, then I can't see Diaz not starting the majority of them, sort of first 5 of the first 6 minimum if Jota's still out. But then Robertson got sort of 13 attacking returns and 16 clean sheets in his first 29 games. That's basically like and return every single appearance that he got. And if he's going to do that again, I can't see Diaz matching him. So that's where it is at the moment. And Robertson came back in. And I love what Robertson did for me at the end of last season as well. Sort of one of the main reasons I finished where he was, because he scored so many points at the end of last season. So he's in there, and I can't see myself really wanting to go for it, apart from it's a squad structure thing that allows me to have that stronger bench if I go with Diaz.
Yeah, I think with the setup you've got, that kind of Robertson versus Diaz question, I wouldn't say it answers itself, but I do think Robertson's probably slightly better value for money. Although with Jota out, I think Diaz becomes a very, very interesting choice. But like for me, like if I only had like one 7 million spot, I would just choose Cancelo, so I could easily just have the Diaz choice. But when you've got both, it's a much more difficult to do that. So some of those points though we'll come on to later on, because there's a question about Cancelo, Robertson. There's a couple of questions about pre-season and Man United as well. So we'll come back to Dallo and whether I think he's a good option in a minute. Let's just move on to some of the other players again that aren't in too many drafts. You are a Chelsea fan as well, so I'm surprised to see Foden in there ahead of Mason Mount, if I'm honest, because at least with Mount, like, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but he's going to start pretty much every game, and unless there's a load of new signings that come in, I think he's going to start most games, right?
Yeah, he is, but as a Chelsea fan, I'm actually different to a lot of people play FPL, that I tend to be put off my own assets because I don't want to watch us and have to worry about the stress of having a Chelsea asset and wanting us to win the game. Again, being at all the matches, it's too much stress having to watch the game. I also don't love Mason Mount as an FPL asset. He's not that explosive. He gets taken on and off set pieces for sort of Reece James, Chilwell, which is pretty infuriating as well. I don't love him as an FPL option. I think if Sterling was slightly cheaper, then maybe I'd look at him. But it's actually just that I think the defense, again, will continue to be where all the value is. I got Reece James, and I can't see myself going without him. It's him versus Chilwell. When they came in at the same price, Chilwell went straight in. But I still worry when a player comes back from an injury like he had, just how quickly or how much to the same level he's going to return. And I know what Reece James did at the end of last season. I know what he's capable of doing. So it feels like they're pretty equal, and Chilwell just feels a little bit more risky because he had that injury. But yeah, I'm not going to be back in Mount. I love him as a player, but I don't love him as an FPL pick.
I'm really surprised at that, because like I'm someone like I loved using expected goals, expected assists, and one thing that really went up last year for Mason Mount was his goal threat went up quite a bit. So his numbers are really impressive. I guess there's a question of will he keep that up this year, but I guess he's young, he's still developing. So I really like him. I feel like Saka, Diaz, and Mount are probably the three best 8 millions. Obviously, I love Foden. I could really do. I had him in my team a lot last year. I just always worry about those minutes, and now he played quite a bit as number 9 last year, and Haaland's there. Do you think he's going to get a similar? Like, he got 24 starts, I think, last year. Do you think he's going to get close to that again?
Yeah, the only thing for me is with Sterling and Jesus going, there's a little bit less rotation threat on those wings. Again, now Alvarez could play out wide. Bernardo Silva could start playing on the wing. But for me, Mahrez, Grealish, Foden are the three that are going to make up those winger spots the majority of the time. It might not end up being Foden, but it'll end up being one of those three that I think have the most likely chance to start. Their opening 6 games as well are so good. I can see them scoring a lot of goals. And with everyone having Haaland, it basically means that I'm not gaining very many points from him, that I wanted another option. The big thing for me when I look at my team is that I've got no Spurs. And I think a lot of us are looking at our teams thinking, I've got no Spurs in it. I've gone very much off Perisic, and I don't plan on having him in my team again with the minutes he's getting in pre-season. But having Foden could go to Kulusevski, but then Richarlison, he's going to have to get minutes with the amount of money they've paid for him. But this, could allow me to do Haaland to Kane, for example. And the more I look at it, the more I actually look at the numbers, the more I think, why have I not got Kane or Son in my team? Because they're proven. And I know we had a question about like picking new players to the league. I hate doing it. And the majority of times it pays off versus you get burnt by it is sort of a ratio of you don't want to do it. And that makes me think that if I go Foden in midfield and I trust him to start, then maybe I go Haaland to Kane. But the ownership, I hate to play my game that way, but it does worry me a little bit. But then the Spurs ownership is so high as well.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Like, I'm on Haaland right now as well. Like, I get the Kane thing. I've said this loads. Right? You know exactly what you're going to get with him. He will do really well. My only thing is, right, because the point keeps coming up from people. Anytime I put a draft out without Spurs, They're like, yeah, this is great, but you've got no Spurs. Yeah, you've got Haaland, that's great, but you've got no Kane. My question to all those people is, what if you get the wrong Spurs player? Like, if you put Harry Kane in instead of Haaland, and then Son smashes it at the start of the season, you're no better off, really. And I know what people will say. Like, if one of them scores, it's probably the other one assisting. Yeah. I get that. They will be the two players that score most goals. But we saw last year that Kane smashed it, everyone had Son, loads of people switched, even for a hit. I think it was around game week 30. And then all of a sudden, Kane stops scoring, and then Son smashes it. So yeah. I do get, like, I think Spurs players are great. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're bad picks, of course, right? If you've got Son or Kane in your team, they're great. But having just one doesn't necessarily mean you've got the right one. So if you're only picking them because they're Spurs, I don't know if that's necessarily the best way of doing it. But I still feel like there's only like 2 or 3 players that are definitely locked in my team. I'm completely open to switching Haaland to Son or Kane if I need to. And I think Community Shield against Liverpool will give us a bit of insight. But I don't know. I mean, do you worry about that? Like, if you're going to switch Haaland to one of the other Spurs players, would you then, because like you think they're going to do really well, they're proven, etc. in the league, would you then panic about the fact that you might get the wrong one?
A little bit, but then there's no team that shares points around more than Manchester City, right? I know they're probably going to score more goals than other teams, but there is a chance that they score 4 goals and it's Kevin De Bruyne, it's Foden, it's Grealish, it's Mahrez who does it. So I feel like we could have the same argument looking at Manchester City as well. I like to pick players from teams that score the most goals. It sounds simple again, but if you pick players that's from teams that score goals, you're likely to end up with more points. So that's why Haaland's in there at the moment. Kulusevski would fill such a hole in there instead of Foden. And I just keep being told that Richarlison's going to have to get minutes. But if I get to the beginning of the season, I think Kulusevski's going to start. He was so good at the end of last season. From when he joined, not many players scored more points than him. And if he could go in for Foden here, then I think I'd be looking at a team that I'm really happy with. But I just worry about his minutes a little bit.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, I'm not sure what to make about Kulusevski at all. Because I'm kind of, when I first saw the Richarlison move, I thought, okay, that's a squad player coming in. But a lot of people seem convinced he's definitely going to get minutes. But he's not. It can only be for Kulusevski. That's the only player. He's not going to start. He might take some minutes off Son and Kane through like substitutions when they're winning heavily and stuff like that. But unless they're injured or there's huge fixture congestion, they're starting every game, Son and Kane. So it can only be for Kulusevski. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in pre-season. Obviously suspended for the first game. The other £8 million midfielder, I guess, I don't think we've mentioned, that's not Mason Mount, is Saka, who, again, for minutes, like, is absolutely nailed. And I don't necessarily think that Foden won't play, but I guess there's always that doubt, right? No matter how much you back him, there's always going to be slight doubts every time the team sheet comes out. Any interest in him, or are you just worried about doubling up on Arsenal?
I'm not worried about doubling up on Arsenal, actually. They come top of almost every fixture ticket that you look at, and I think it's possible that I go Jesus and Saka. I feel like because of the amount of those sort of 8 million midfielders that we have, and I can only cover a certain amount of those teams in attack, I probably won't end up with him. But I don't think it's impossible. I think the chances are if I have another Arsenal option, it will be Martinelli and it will be that sort of cheap pick. 8 million on Jesus and 8 million on Saka feels a little bit too much. I do think they'll hit the ground running, and I do think people who double up could be really well rewarded, but I just like trying to cover a few bases at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, one more question on the draft, and we'll move on to the questions. Reece James, I mean, I think he's a great pick. I agree. I think if you're going to go for one, you go for him over Chilwell. You got any worries about the Chelsea defence? I feel like I'm having to convince a lot of people that Chelsea defence is good. I know they've lost a few players, but they're also buying some good players as well. And I think they'll probably keep the wing-back system. I mean, you've got any doubts at all?
No, I don't really. I think Koulibaly coming in is a great signing. Thiago Silva will continue to do it again. We've got Chalobah as well, who will continue to step on. And then I think we're going to go in for another centre-back as well to sort of join those that we've got. Chilwell coming back and Reece James. We remember what Chelsea did at the beginning of the season when those two were both fit. We didn't look the same for the rest of the season. We were trying to fill gaps, plug holes. Alonso did a little bit, but it wasn't the same. When those two come back, I think a lot of them could be nice assets. And actually, again, I'm probably not going to start with him, but I think it makes Havertz a nice option as well. Not going to go with him again because it's just a bit of a risk and I don't quite know how we're going to line up. Preseason might help that, but I can just see the wing backs doing it again. I can't see us going to a back four. I don't think any of our centre backs suit a two centre-back formation, and then we lose the effectiveness of two of our best players in Chilwell and Reece James. I just can't see us changing to a back four, which means I think they'll have another good season as well. And at 6 million, again, being $1 million cheaper than the likes of Cancelo, Trent, if they start the amount of games, they could easily match them for points.
Yeah, I don't see how I don't go for James and Chilwell, to be honest, if they're both fit. But let's see what happens. All right, let's move on to some of the questions. All right, so I put out a tweet on Twitter asking for some of your questions. We're going to run through a few of them quick enough anyway. So this one's about pre-season. What importance do you place on pre-season friendlies? For example, will you jump on Man United players, which you have obviously with Dalot, after their performances so far? So what do you look for in pre-season, and how much emphasis do you put on it for your picks?
I don't really in terms of form. I look more for who I expect going to start. And so for Dalot, for example, I've seen him start a few games and I think he's going to start that. And I know what he's capable of doing from last season if he does start. It's more the last couple of games going into the season. I pay attention to like formations, who's in that starting lineup. I do my best not to look at who's scoring goals. It probably does sink in a little bit. And there will be someone who looks really hot in preseason that I might start to consider that I was maybe 50-50 on. But I try to not pay attention to it. We see a lot of rotated teams and you don't really know what's going to happen and how players are actually going to perform when they get into a Premier League game. It's very different. Again, it's just the sort of lineup that I really look at. Again, the last couple of games when I really think, okay, is Foden going to be part of that strongest Manchester City lineup? Is Dalot going to be in? Is Kulusevski going to start all the time, for example? Those are the things I look at. I try not to look at who's actually scoring the goals, although it might change a draft briefly, but I'll end up going back and taking them out, I think.
I did that with Man United. I put a few of their players in, and right now they're all gone again. They might get back in. I'm kind of similar. I think the last game and then the one before are usually, like you said, the most important. I think when you start seeing players start to get like 60, 70 minutes in one of the final two games, there's a possible good chance that they're kind of going to be lining up in that first game, depending on the team. I mean, Man City could play one team in the last preseason game and a completely different one the next. We know that, but generally I do look for that. I'm more looking at formations. For example, at the time we're recording this, Wolves are playing one of their preseason games and apparently they're playing a back four, so that is a shift from last year. That's new information that might make them weaker defensively. It might make them better attacking wise. We're not going to know that from preseason, but it's kind of information you can use. And I think I'll just talk about Man United really quickly here. I think what I would take away from Man United's preseason so far is they have a manager that knows what he wants and he's getting that style implemented quickly enough. But they have played weak teams so far. And I don't mean like Liverpool, obviously not a weak team, neither are Palace, but the teams they put out for a lot of the games were weak. So I think one of the goals, for example, I think Lindelof's in the box and Crystal Palace are just not really pressing him that much at all. I think if that was in the Premier League, there'd be a higher intensity and he wouldn't be given that much time. But I think it's good to know the manager's getting that much time with what looks like the first 11, like Sancho, Rashford and Martial getting a lot of minutes. So if Ronaldo does go, that is probably going to be the front three. So you can get some context around it. But I agree. Like if you're seeing a player score and then they're going in your team, that's probably not the best way to do it. I think with Man United, it's just the fact that they have been good a long time ago, and now you're seeing them for like 6.57 million. It feels like a bargain, but it's been a long time since Man United were, really great options. So although I think Martial did okay in COVID times, I think I might have had him for like a hat trick or something. Yeah,
that sort of after COVID period, they did very well for us all. Yeah, we were doubling, tripling up on them.
So who knows? Maybe they'll be good. But I think in general preseason, I agree with Harry. Like just take information like formations and who's playing and who's likely to be first 11, but don't take too much away from who's scoring goals. This is a good one. What's the key factor you use when making a decision that's a genuine 50-50? So you can't split two players. Apart from flipping a coin, is there anything in particular you do to decide?
Yeah, so little things like fixtures are big for me, but again, if they've both got good fixtures, you're pretty tight. Picking the player from a team that scores more goals, which again sounds obvious, but like if you're picking a player from a team that scores more, you've got more chance of getting points. And the final one, I use a stat of goal involvement quite a lot actually. So like if they score, what's the percentage chance of their involvement if they're on the pitch? And I use that quite a lot if I've got a 50-50 call. If all of these things are the same, I tend to have a hunch on who I prefer out of the two. I don't use loads of stats, and there isn't one that'll be like, okay, who's got the highest XG per 90? That's the one I'll go with. I'll base it more on my opinion. I watch a lot of football, so it'll be more sort of eye test and who I've seen that I prefer out of the two if it really does come down to a 50-50. But the chance of that happening, I feel like one of my decision-making things before that will split them a little bit, which will give me a hunch one way or another.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think a lot of the times it's not really a genuine 50-50. I think sometimes it's just a little bit of worry about the other player. And I've got Haaland and Kane on screen right now. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking at. I would, if it was genuine, if I was genuinely unsure, I would even like maybe go as far as say pick the player I like the most or who I'd be less worried about if they do go mad. Or you can just use a tool like Rate My Team tool on Fantasy Football Scout. You can go and use that, see who they project higher, and if you really can't decide, just let a computer do it for you, right? If you can't decide, if there is one player like you said that you do actually prefer, you're just a bit worried, then pick them. But I think that's what I would do. Or you could go for ownership. I know people hate that conversation, but if you've got two players and you can't split them and one is higher owned, that's the one I would usually take, unless it's near the end of the season and I'm looking to gain rank. So that's how I would look at it. Okay, diversifying picks. Is it? I think I've spelled that wrong. Maybe I don't know if I have or not. Diversify. Yeah, I think I've spelled it right. Is it better to diversify your picks by choosing players from as many teams as possible, or should you go for players from as few clubs as possible with emphasis on the top 6? Any thoughts on that?
Again, if you can pick a team, which we seem to be able to this season, based around the top 6, then I'm quite happy to. I'm pretty confident we know the sort of first 10 games that the likes of Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City, Spurs, Manchester United potentially in that bucket as well, maybe not. We kind of know what we're going to get from them. And if you can afford a whole team, they're the teams that are likely to keep the most clean sheets this season. They're the teams that are likely to score the most goals as well. So why not pick the players that are going to be involved in these things? Don't ditch one again. Don't pick a differential just for the sake of it when you can get Diaz for 8 million and you know what you're going to get from Liverpool. He's likely to be involved. We saw what we got from him last season. So particularly this season, I'm not diversifying a lot. Like I think I've only got 2 players outside the sort of big 6 clubs that we talk about in my starting 11. And if I could go Raya up to Mendy, for example, I would have done, because these players keep clean sheets. These players tend to score more goals. And I think it's as simple as that. Previous seasons, it's not been as easy to pick a team like this. And I think diversifying has worked. And when we've had COVID potential issues, then diversifying has been something we need to look at a little bit more. But I don't see that impacting our seasons this much, as much as it has done in previous years. So I'm pretty happy to triple up on Liverpool, triple up on Man City, because I expect them to finish first and second again this year.
Yeah, I'm definitely not making any picks based on COVID postponements, that's for sure. I think like a different way of framing this question is essentially, should I make a worse pick because they play for a different team? And the answer to that should be no, basically. So yeah, I agree. I'm not really that worried. I get like double and triple up on defense. It can be psychologically annoying when like a goal goes in, but ultimately, again, like we said, we shouldn't be overcomplicating things. We should just pick the players that's going to give us the most chance to get in the most points. If we're keeping it simple, anyway. All right, you kind of touched on this already, so we don't need to go over it massively again. But looking at Haaland versus other premium players, how important is the new, like basically Premier League newcomer factor when starting the season? I actually looked at a few players who in the past have come to the league new. So Son, for example, in his first Premier League season, he only got 4 goals, 1 assist, but he only started 13 times. After that, he hit double figures every single year. So his first season wasn't great. De Bruyne, and I know it's not quite the same because he was at Chelsea, but that doesn't count. When he came to Man City from Wolfsburg, he got 7 goals, 9 assists in the first season. So not quite as much as seasons after that, but he still hit it off pretty good. Michu, long time ago, he absolutely smashed it. 18 goals in his first season for Swansea. And even someone like Aubameyang here, his first season from the Bundesliga at Arsenal, 10 goals, 4 assists in 12 starts. So for me, I don't think it matters. I think people focus too much on when it goes wrong. And I just feel like Haaland is, apart from maybe Mbappe, like, you know, one of the world's best young talents. He's scored a hell of a lot of goals. He's going into a team, like you said a lot, scores a lot of goals. So I wouldn't be that worried. I don't think it's necessarily safer to go for Son, Salah and Kane, especially not De Bruyne. Like, I feel like De Bruyne is the worst pick out of them all. But does it put you off at all?
A little bit, because I know what they've done before. But again, I know how good he is. And I don't think we've had a new signing to the league like him that's been as good and as high profile as him, and that is proven to do it and is physical like him. I think that's a big thing, that a lot of the signings that haven't hit the ground running have struggled with the physicality of the league. And I think Haaland fits it much better than a lot of these players have. So I don't worry about it too much. Again, that Manchester City side doesn't have a lot of changes to it. It's just him that's fitting into it, fitting in up front in that Manchester City team. It can't be that difficult to score goals with the likes of De Bruyne, Foden, Mahrez, Grealish feeding you, Bernardo Silva as well. So again, like, if I'd rather he was, in the league and had sort of moved from another Premier League club and knew the league a little bit better, yeah, I'd prefer that. But I'm not put off by it, because I think he's very capable of doing it, given what we've seen. He fits the sort of Premier League type a lot better than I think a lot of the players that haven't done it, like Werner, for example. We can understand a little bit why it's not worked for him, but Haaland, for me, I think it will hit the ground running.
Yeah, I know this is easy to say because I don't actually have to make the decision, but I feel like if Kane and Haaland's fixtures were switched, I probably would be on Kane right now. Yeah, because I think that having to play Bournemouth at home in game week 2 versus Spurs, who have to play Chelsea, which is going to be a difficult game. And there's nothing to say that Kane and Son can't both score in that game, but they are playing one of the kind of top 3 defences in the league, which we expect to still be a top 3 defence this year. So I feel like, I don't let it worry me, because like Salah, right? He was new to the league. Again, I know the Chelsea factor, but he was relatively new to the league for Liverpool, and he went and broke the record for points. I know he didn't come from the Bundesliga, but I think people focus too much on players that don't do well. Like Fernandes, again, new to the league for Man United. He absolutely smashed it. Yes, some of that was due to penalties, but he just did really well early on. So there's plenty of players that do smash it. So yeah, I don't factor that in at all personally.
Yeah, let's just Haaland could be on penalties as well. I don't see any reason why he won't be taking them. So if Fernandes can do it, there's no reason Haaland can't either.
Exactly. Okay, let's finish on hopefully an easy one. It's a quick one anyway. If you could only have one, so forget your current draft for now, would you pick Cancelo or Robertson?
I'd go Robertson out of the two, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on it, but I think Diaz or Laporte instead of Cancelo is a much easier way of me saving money than downgrading Robertson. Now, a lot of people disagree with me with that, and I've got Cancelo in here. But if I needed to free money up, Cancelo down to one of those Man City guys would happen before Robertson downgraded to Van Dijk, for example.
Yeah, fair point. I think for me, I would go for Cancelo just because I think Diaz is such a good £8 million pick right now. I don't know if he will be for the whole season, but that is probably why I'll focus on Cancelo. If I couldn't get Diaz for whatever reason, then it would be a much harder decision. I think right now I'm probably on Robertson slightly, but honestly, it's like, I don't want to sit on the fence, but it is that close. Like, they're both really good picks. I think all those home games for City so early on, I think they're just primed for clean sheets, maybe more so than Liverpool. So I don't know. I think Cancelo's a great pick. Anyway, we will leave it there. Harry, thank you very much for joining me. That was great.
Thank you for having me on. Yeah, good to chat, talk about the teams. I know everyone's teams are starting to look a little bit different, but those sort of fringe decisions is what's going to make or break the start of our seasons.
Yeah, for sure. And again, if you think someone's going to do well, like we said earlier, it doesn't matter if they're highly owned, just pick them. Like I said at the start of the video, if you want to follow Harry, there's links in the description below to Twitter and on YouTube. Go and follow him there. You can see how his team does for the rest of this season. Obviously, if you enjoyed this, give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and we'll catch you again soon.